Welcome to The Spotlight, the podcast where veterans and military spouses connect and share how their military experience has transformed their lives and their businesses. Here's your host, Bob Loudon.
Hey, this is your host, Bob Loudon, founder of the VeteranCrowd Network, the network that brings veterans and veteran-led businesses together with each other and the resources they need to prosper. And you are tuning into The Spotlight. Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to The Spotlight. This is your host, Bob Loudon. A few years ago, I went down to Charleston, South Carolina. I was driving into town late one evening and had booked a room at the Embassy Suites. Pulled in, checked in, it was dark. And as I got my key and went to the room, there was something familiar about that hotel, even though I'd never been in it before. And it wasn't until that I got in that room that I realized that I was in the old barracks of the Citadel that had been converted into a hotel. In a strange way, sleeping in a prison reminiscent of an East German, torture chamber was comforting to me. Well, my guest is from Charleston, South Carolina. His name is Lynn Selden. Lynn is a VMI grad, lives in Beaufort, South Carolina. Got to get my Beauforts and Beauforts straight. But he is a VMI grad, class of 1983, an Army veteran, and has taken on a very interesting career. Lynn, welcome to the program. Thanks for stepping into the spotlight.
Thanks so much for having me, Bob. I'm looking forward to it.
You have taken a career that I'm just really curious how it happened. And I'm going to describe it. I'm probably going to butcher it. But basically what you do is write and produce articles that are travel oriented, that and the photography. How did that happen? How did you become a travel writer? And then I really want to understand the lifestyle here, because it sounds to me like you just travel all the time and get paid to do it. So what a life.
That's pretty much it. The quick background is that it all started back in the Army. I was stationed in Germany. And it was very much a work hard, play hard situation where we would have return of forces to Germany, reforger. So we were in the field for quite some time, and then we would have time off. And I was able to jump on MAC flights inexpensively down to an Air Force base in Crete and just different trips. And I decided that I would write an article about one of those trips to Greece. And I typed it up on an IBM Selectric typewriter. And I sent it off to Stars and Stripes, the military newspaper. Yeah. And 2 weeks later, I got a check for $50, and they said they were going to run the story. I was like, this is great. I can, travel and actually get paid to do it. And by the way, they still pay about $50 an article. But so that was my first clip. It was on Greece. And the Stars and Stripes over the next 3 years while I was in Germany ended up running, I guess, about 15 travel stories of mine. And that led me, when I came back to the United States and I out processed from active duty and went into the reserves, I just basically started pitching travel stories to magazines and newspapers. A lot of them were military. Like I wrote a lot for the Army, Air Force, and Navy Times. They each had their own publication. And so I would do travel stories for them, a lot of outdoor stuff. I wrote a lot about whitewater rafting, adventure travel for the military publications, because that tends to be their audience. So that's how I got started. And that was almost 40 years ago.
Wow. Now, do destinations now call you up and say, hey, come enjoy our place and write an article? Is that really how the economics works on it?
It's exactly right. They see our work. We do a lot of work for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So we get a lot of invitations from folks that are interested in having us write about their resort or, their businesses, a lot of resorts, a lot of cruise ships, but they don't pay you to come. You make money by selling stories about there, but you do travel, generally speaking, for free.
Right. And so, gosh, how many cruises have you been on in 40 years? I'm almost scared to ask.
I think we're, the last 2 years, obviously, our last one was right before COVID, a long cruise in Alaska. And I think that was our 61st cruise.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So I got a question. River cruise, ocean cruise, which one do you prefer? Or maybe I'm going to get you in trouble.
No, not at all. Really, since before COVID, we were starting to do a lot more river cruising and a lot more just generally small ship cruising. Since COVID, we've talked a lot about it. We probably won't get on many ships that have more than 600 or 700 passengers at the most. And we prefer like river cruises. We were just on one in Savannah the other day that I think they had 98 passengers, and that's great. It's more intimate. You get on and off the ship very easily. And that was on its way.
So it was one in Savannah. Where did that cruise go? I'm more familiar with the European river cruise than I am U.S. ones.
River cruising in America is really going to take off, and it already is. It's coming back, not just on the Mississippi. We've done obviously the Mississippi, the Ohio. There's one in the Northwest on the Columbia and Snake Rivers that's wine focused. That's fantastic. The two big players in the United States are American Queen Voyages, and I don't know how many ships they have now. They're excellent. And the other's called American Cruise Lines. They're the two big players. This ship was docked in Savannah. It was on its way to Halifax in Canada, and would stop in Charleston, I think Norfolk, Baltimore, and on up the coast. U.S. river cruising is really going to be a big story in coming years.
I think, if you've never been on a river, we did one on the Danube.
Oh, beautiful.
It was, it's just, 150 passengers on the ship. We went through a bunch of the locks. I mean, the engineering alone in that system is just incredible. You've written a couple of books. The latest being 100 Things to Do in Charleston, South Carolina Before You Die. How did you wind up in the low country of South Carolina? Let me ask that first question. And
sure.
Then we're going to talk about some of the 100 things to do. One of which is to kidnap, certain articles from the Citadel, but I don't know if that's in the list or not. But.
The Citadel's in the book. I think I have people go to a dress parade as their thing. It brought back shivers just writing about parades. So basically, the Low Country lured us away about 4 years ago full time. My writing mentor was a Citadel graduate named Pat Conroy.
Sure. The Lords of Discipline.
Exactly.
Did you meet him?
Oh, yes. In fact, just before this interview, I actually write at his house every morning. That's where I go to write fiction.
Oh,
very, very blessed. I've been doing that for about 3 years now. I just completed another novel, and it was entirely written at his desk. The
Lords of Discipline for the Educated is a fantastic book. And I also watched the movie, and while everyone else was appalled and stunned at the opening sequence, I was giggling my way through it. So anyway,
we can identify, can't we?
We can identify with that.
So I met Pat about 10 years ago now when a book called South Abroad, which was based in Charleston, came out. And we met in Charleston, went to lunch, and just really hit it off. And during that lunch at a place called Slightly North of Broad, Pat said no one had ever written, snob. Pat said, no one's ever written a novel about VMI like I did for the Citadel in Lords of Discipline. And I said, you're right. That's never really happened. He said, I always thought that one of our former superintendents, who was a great writer, Cy Bunting, might. Never did. Wrote an excellent novel, military based. But so that very night, I was back home in Oak Island, North Carolina. Pat calls me about 11:30 at night. This was the first of dozens of late night calls that Pat was legendary for pursuing. And he was like, Selden, I'm serious about this. I think you can write a novel about VMI. And it took about 3 years and a lot of time with him in Beaufort. And that's how I started coming here a lot. He coached me through writing a novel. And that was my first novel. And right now, only novel.
In his ring.
Exactly. So that really was a result of meeting Pat. And he took me under his wings. I had written nonfiction by that time for 30 years. but fiction's a whole another animal. And he was so helpful. He gave me a great, well, he gave me the title. I had another title to begin with. He gave me a great cover blurb, which is really important when people pick up a book to see Pat Conroy's name on it. Has sold a lot more copies than my name being on it for sure. So that's how I ended up in Beaufort. Started coming here a lot, got to know his family, his brothers and sister a lot, and his wife, who's wonderful. She's the one that about 2.5 years ago said, I'd really like you to come start writing in Pat's office. It needs a writer in there.
Here's a storyline for you. A certain, famous cadre corporal and cadre sergeant returns to VMI 40 years later and becomes commandant. We could come up with some nickname for him, like, I don't know, Bogey.
I know exactly. We both know exactly who you're talking about.
That's right. That's right.
There are a lot of stories told and untold about at VMI. I'm just getting started.
Honor, duty, service. At the Veteran Crowd Network, we're focused on our next mission, bringing veterans, veteran-operated businesses, and veteran service organizations together with each other and the resources they need to prosper. That's why we are launching the Veteran Crowd Rewards Program, exclusively for our individual and corporate members. Now you can save on travel, restaurants, goods, and services from brands you trust online and at over 900,000 locations nationwide. Find out more today at VeteranCrowdNetwork.com. If you are a veteran-operated business, or a VSO, consider the connections, the network, the benefits, the engagement, and success of working with other veterans again. The Veteran Crowd Network, you paid a lot of dues to join this club.
Hey, you're listening to the Spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. My guest is Lynn Selden, an author and Army grad. Lynn, I want to shift gears a little bit. You wrote something interesting. You've been traveling up into the Sandhills regions of North Carolina, and saw a recent article. We're going to put a link to it in the show notes, but in and around Pinehurst, you kind of made a little discovery not too long ago.
Yeah, everyone thinks of Pinehurst for the golf and the Sandhills, and it's very true. And my wife Cele and I were actually up there working on a story about the restaurant scene, but we kept noticing how many veteran-owned and operated businesses were there. It was phenomenal, I guess, per capita. It blew us away, and so we proposed to the Convention and Visitors Bureau that we do a story about it. And the more we dug into it, the more businesses came up. This all got started because we were at a brewery, and they were supposed to have really good food as well. So we were there, started talking to the owner, and he turns out to be a veteran. And he said, 2 other breweries in the area are also veteran owned. So it's really 3 or 4 of the beer businesses are veteran owned. Some by veterans who served together with the 82nd Airborne and Fort Bragg Special Forces. That turned out to be the real link with all of the veteran owned and operated businesses. Fort Bragg folks who fell in love with the area, and when they retired, came back to the area and started various businesses, including these breweries.
I went to Fort Bragg a lot. I didn't fall in love with it, but do you think, this is just a quick, curious question. Do you think the guys that are part of elite military units make good entrepreneurs? I mean, are you seeing any of that?
You know the answer to that. Yes, sir. Absolutely. And it was fun to talk to these veterans specifically because one of them, the owner of Southern Pines, they were all quite articulate, but he really put it into pretty cool words. It may have made it into the story, but he basically said, I needed another foxhole. And owning a business was like a 24/7 foxhole for him. And so he started this brewery I think it was the second one in the area. It's called Southern Pines. They make some fantastic beers. And again, he was quite articulate in that. I thought that analogy was really good, that veterans need, they need that sort of stimulation and that foxhole effect going into battle, because owning your own business, as you know, and I know, it is 24/7, and it requires a lot of things that I learned at VMI and in the military.
I would tell my friends the good thing about owning a business is you know what the owner's thinking at 3 o'clock in the morning. The problem is you don't know what the owner's thinking about at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
It can be a very scary experience.
Absolutely.
And so you've written some articles. There's another little thing you mentioned, the Port Tour Passport. What is that?
And it actually was just developing when we were there researching the story. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but this is what the sort of the passport looks like. They developed this as an impetus for folks to try to go to every beverage-oriented business in the area. I think there's a total of maybe 7. The 3 breweries. There's a growler company that's very popular with soldiers.
Get a T-shirt if you hit all of them in one day, huh?
I have to look at the different rewards. They have a glass, a Sandhills Tour glass, a really cool Donald Ross medallion, like a coin, big coin, that celebrates the 150th anniversary of Pinehurst, I think. So it's a really cool program. So the 3 breweries, there's this growler company, there's a hard cider company. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's also a veteran-owned whiskey business coming online as well, called Brad Hawking, I believe. Brad Hawling Whiskey Company, B-Hawk. He's a veteran as well, and so is his wife.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna have to, people have to do that when they go down there to play golf, and kind of do the, gonna work that in. Hey, let's shift back to Charleston for a second. Can you share with me a couple of teasers in the 100 things to do in Charleston, that bucket list, so to speak, that everybody ought to be thinking about? Just a few teasers.
Ironically, you mentioned the Embassy Suites. It's in the books. It's in the book for that exact reason, because it does look like a barracks, like VMI's or the Citadels.
A little bit of a prison atmosphere.
Exactly. Yeah. The rooms are a bit nicer now, for sure. But that's right on Marion Square.
The walls are thick. You won't hear anybody next door.
That's a great point. I may steal that line. So that's an interesting one. And, obviously going to the Citadel, if you can get there on a Friday for a dress parade, it's a great experience in general. I love going up there for football games, especially when VMI plays and beats the Citadel, like not this past year, but a couple of years before that. So those are 2 good ones. I mentioned slightly north of Broad. That's still a great restaurant. There are 100 entries, and the first 40 are food oriented. Charleston is a big foodie destination. Slightly north of Broad is a great choice.
One of our favorite, towns to visit. Talk a little bit about the Battery. One of the interesting things about Charleston is a good portion of the land was underwater in the 1700s, is actually reclaimed.
Bingo. Yeah, the whole Battery area with Rainbow Row, which are the real colorful houses, that was underwater and was reclaimed, and has been underwater a couple times the last 2 years as well. Charleston, I know this has happened here in Beaufort as well. They've sent folks over to the Netherlands to find out how they, hold their water back and how they channel it. And I think Charleston is in for years of, flooding issues.
Right.
It's
interesting that, in times prior to the Revolutionary War, that they were able to reclaim land, of that magnitude. It must have been an interesting engineering feat
for sure
at that point in time. Lynn, what's the future look like for you? What are you working on right now?
A couple of things we did during COVID. We came out with a follow-up we came out with the second edition of the Charleston book, and then also came out with 100 Things to Do in Savannah Before You Die. We mentioned we live in Beaufort, and we're sort of halfway between. That book has done extremely well. We'll be back there tomorrow to do a couple of book signings. So that's out there. I actually just finished up a sequel to Virginia's Ring. So very excited about that. It's called Carolina's Ring and takes place at the Citadel in the Carolinas and then back at VMI with some of the same characters, including Virginia. And ironically, today is Thursday. On Tuesday, I signed a contract for that book with a Virginia publisher. So I'm very excited about that. They're based in Virginia Beach. They've done a number of excellent books. So I'm looking forward to see how they package it. And that will be out next year.
Next year. Okay. So we'll be looking forward to Carolina's Ring.
Yep.
Coming out next year. You know, I got myself in trouble. You know, rings are a big deal at both the Citadel
Where am
and
I?
at VMI. I took mine off, but it's in my pocket. I'll get it back out here and we'll get it up there. There we go.
Here we go.
But you know, the Citadel and VMI getting the ring is a huge deal. Guys at the Citadel go run and knock on the chapel door, I think, is one of their traditions. But, you know, we're all part of the Brotherhood of the Ring. And while we have great rivalries with the Citadel, we have also a lot of mutual respect. And although I do have a joke about the Citadel, I'll share it with you after the recording goes on. Okay. So how do people get in touch with you, Lynn?
The best bet is through our website, and it's seldoninc.com, and that's with a K. So it's seldonink.com. And a bunch of articles are on there. Obviously, all the books are on there that people can order signed copies of. So that's been really cool. I think
that's fantastic. Fantastic news. So we got to get to break the story here today. Yep. That you got that contract for the next book. I think that's fantastic.
I just asked the publisher if it was okay to post it, and I have not posted anything about it yet. So you're the first to hear.
Interesting. Very interesting. There we go, folks. We're breaking the news right here on the Spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. Well, listen, our guest has been Lynn Selden, VMI class of '83, U.S. Army veteran, co-author of 100 Things to Do in Charleston Before You Die and Virginia's Ring. He's the leader of Selden Inc. and does travel-oriented writing and photography. I encourage you to look at the links in the show notes. Follow Lynn and what he's doing, and we'll be looking forward to that book coming out. Lynn, thank you for stepping into the spotlight.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
So this is the Spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. We bring you veterans that are making a difference. I'm going to throw a Army Bravo Zulu out to Lynn Selden today for appearing on the program, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Spotlight by Veteran Crowd. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and uploads, please visit our website at VeteranCrowdNetwork.com. We'll see you next time.